Shalom, I'm Sara Rigler, and I feel I must share with you this article that I just wrote for the website aish.com, AISH.com. I'm a writer for aish.com. This is about the harrowing, miraculous, action-packed escape of the chief rabbi of Kyiv from the Ukraine. It's an amazing story, and I really think that you'll just be wowed by it. So I'm going to kind of read it to you and show you the pictures. I spent hours interviewing Rebbe Ina Markovich, and just an amazing story. So here goes. Rabbi Yonatan Benjamin Markovich, his escape from Kyiv is a combination Hollywood adventure movie and Hasidic tale. A high-speed drive in the dead of night through roadless fields, past axe and knife-wielding Ukrainian volunteer soldiers, attended by miracles and led by an angel. Angel is in quotes. That's what they called him, the angel. This story just unfolded this past week. I'm recording this. This is going up today on aish.com. Today is Tuesday, March 8th, and they literally got out to safety, arrived to Israel just this past Thursday night. So here's the story. Yonatan was born in Uzhhorod, which is a town in the western Ukraine, in 1967. His grandfather was the rabbi of a synagogue there. The grandfather lost his wife and 3 daughters in the Holocaust. He returned to Uzhhorod and remarried, had one more daughter who gave birth to Yonatan, the hero of this story. When Yonatan was just 5 years old, the family made Aliyah to Israel. Yonatan studied in Hasidic yeshivas. He was a Chabadnik, follower of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he got rabbinic ordination. He got about 4 rabbinic ordinations, in fact. And then he joined the Israeli Air Force, which might seem to you like an unlikely choice for a rabbi, but he really excelled there. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe encouraged him to stay in the Air Force. And he became an officer and a career officer. He married, at the age of 22, he married 20-year-old Elka Ina. She had been born in Leningrad, and she had moved to Israel as a young child. In 1998, after 12 years of serving in the Air Force as a high-ranking officer, Yonatan joined a group that was visiting graves of tzaddikim, of holy rabbis in the Ukraine. And he decided to take a detour, a personal visit, to his grandfather's synagogue in Uzhhorod. And there, his life's mission just seized him by the soul. I teach a lot about life's mission. It's very important. At some point, I don't know if you can do it when you're in your 20s or 30s, but certainly by the time you're in your 40s or especially 50s, you have to really recognize what your life's mission is. Because we come down into this world for 2 purposes: to do our tikkun, which I'll be talking a lot about on my YouTube channel, and to fulfill our life's mission. So he, at this point, after 12 years as an officer in the Israeli Air Force, he realized that his life's mission was to revive Jewish life in the Ukraine. So he came back to Israel, and he announced to his wife that that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to go to the Ukraine to work on reviving Jewish life there. And his wife, Ina, was pregnant with their 4th child. She said to him, "Fine, every summer you can volunteer and go there for 2 weeks." And he said, "No, I want to move there." Well, she was absolutely against it. And he played it his ace card. Ina was a teacher. She taught Jewish studies and English, and she had a dream of starting her own school where she could institute her ideals of education through love rather than discipline. And Yonatan said to her, if we go to Ukraine, you can start your own school. And somehow he convinced her. Now, the Israeli Air Force, of course, had rules. You couldn't just leave the Air Force and emigrate to another country knowing all the secrets you knew. So he had to retire from the Air Force and wait 2 years, mandatory waiting period of 2 years. And then they were allowed to emigrate to the Ukraine. This was in the year 2000. So the first thing they had to do, they went to the Ukraine with their 5 children. They would subsequently have 2 more children there in Kyiv. They went to Kyiv, and their first job was to learn Russian and Ukrainian, 2 languages that they didn't know. Although Yonatan had been born in the Ukraine, his family was Yiddish speaking. And although Ina had been born in Leningrad, she left as a young child and was raised in a Hebrew-speaking home. So they had to learn Ukrainian and Russian. In Kyiv, Yonatan and Ina planted a tree. Now, I'm using that metaphor because a tree grows very slowly, and it takes years to produce fruits. And that's what happened there in Kyiv. Very slow, gradual growth, a lot of patience, a lot of hard work. Rabbi Yonatan's vision was to unite the Jews of Kyiv into a coherent community. And he designed a logo. I'm going to show it here on the screen. The logo of the Jewish Community Center of Kyiv is a menorah, according to Maimonides' concept of the menorah that was in our temple here in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. And the menorah, but with roots like a tree. That's really the metaphor here is of a tree, very slow growth. A person doesn't plant a tree to get immediate results. It's a real investment in the future. So they started with a kindergarten. It had 6 pupils, 4 of whom were the Markovich children themselves. And then they had 2 other pupils. But it gradually grew, and the kindergarten grew into added an elementary school and a middle school. So by this year, 2022, the school had 115 children. Now, the society that they faced in the Ukraine was radically different than the family-oriented society that they knew here in Israel. Ina told me, before we showed them what a Jewish family was, we had to show them what a family was. She told me that the local structure there was, the family structure was you had a grandmother, a mother, and a child all living in one apartment. I asked her, like, where were the husbands and fathers? She said they didn't stick around. So that you had grandmother, mother, child. That was where everybody came from. And one boy who went to the Markoviches for a Shabbos meal, he wrote in his diary later that it was the first time he had ever seen a father, mother, and children living together as a family. He'd never seen it before. So another thing was that the Ukraine, which is a nation of 40 million people, it didn't have any schools for autistic children. They didn't relate to them. It was like not to be invested in them. And so in 2012, Ina and another woman opened a kindergarten with 5 children suffering from autism. They called it Child with a Future. And 10 years later, now, that school had grown to having 32 children, the maximum they could hold, and a very long waiting list. Meanwhile, Rabbi Yonatan had become the chief rabbi of Kyiv. He built a synagogue and a community center, a large building, and really worked hard. He together with his oldest son, he ran programs for young people, whatever would attract young people, computer lessons, Jewish singles events. They hosted Shabbos meals, and it was well known that you could just come for the meal. You didn't have to go to the synagogue service, the Sabbath service first. Just come and enjoy the food, which a lot of people did. And they wanted to create a community. And another agenda they had was to have Jews meet and marry Jews. And they succeeded there too. In the last few months, they've had 4 chuppahs, 4 Jewish weddings between men and women that came under the auspices that they met in the Jewish Community Center and they married in the Jewish Community Center. Very big success. Another area where they worked hard was that in the Ukraine, the average pension is like $100 or less per person, not enough to live on. So Rabbi and Ina Markovich, they made food programs. They fed 40 senior citizens in the community center itself, and they distributed 800 food packages every month to needy elderly people, including Holocaust survivors. So that by the time the Russians invaded, the Kyiv Chabad Jewish Community Center was servicing some 2,500 Jews. The tree was producing prodigious fruits. And then the invasion came. The Russian army massed 100,000 troops on the borders of Ukraine, and the American and Israeli embassies warned the Markoviches that an invasion was imminent. But like most Ukrainians, the Markoviches didn't believe it. Ina told me, I must admit that a Russian invasion looked to me like a very low probability. I've seen on the internet other people in the Ukraine saying that if you asked me what was more likely, an invasion of aliens from outer space or an invasion of the Russians, I would say an invasion of aliens from outer space was more likely. They just didn't get it. But fear and uncertainty, as things started to build up with this Russian buildup and intelligence reports, fear and uncertainty started to grip the population. So Rabbi Markovich, who was by then a well-known public personality in Kyiv, he would be on Ukrainian television and radio, and he started he saw it as his mission to project an air of positivity to counteract all this fear. And he mounted all over Kyiv, he mounted these huge lit up signs with the picture of the Lubavitcher Rabbi and a quote from the Rabbi translated into Ukrainian saying, think good and it will be good. Now, in the Ukraine, there are no bomb shelters. So the government announced that in the event of an attack, people should go to the metro. But the Jewish Community Center was 20 minutes from the nearest metro station. So the Markoviches prepared for the worst by stocking 6 tons of food, 50 mattresses, water, and fuel in the basement of the community center. Then, as we all know, in the early hours of Thursday, February 24th, the invasion started. The Markoviches were awakened by the sounds of bombs exploding, and chaos ensued. Wealthy members of the community who had been supporting the community financially led, taking their money with them, of course, because they didn't know what they would need. And the Israeli embassy barraged the Markoviches with messages, leave urgently. Those who had the financial and physical ability to do so, many of them did leave. But the Markoviches themselves faced a dilemma. How could they desert their community that they had built up over 22 years of so much effort and love and dedication and connection to these people? Ina said to me, we were left with scared people, many of them in dire need. So they decided to move to the JCC, the Jewish Community Center, and to protect the community in the basement there. It wasn't a bomb shelter, but Rabbi Markovich was said in the quoted in the press as saying, it's not a bomb shelter, but at least we can be together. They could give support to each other, and of course, they could distribute food that they had there. So 60 frightened Jews joined them in the basement of the community center. In addition to some non-Jewish neighbors asked if they could be admitted, and Rabbi Markovich admitted them. Then On Friday, right before Shabbat, a television crew from ABC came, and they made a television broadcast of the Jews of Kyiv, getting ready for Shabbat. Of course, the rabbi wouldn't let them film on Shabbat, so right before Shabbat, they looked very calm, but apparently it was quite a put on. At 3 a.m. Friday night, Kyiv was targeted with massive bombing. No one in the JCC could sleep. Toward morning, a person from the Ukrainian Special Services appeared. He disclosed to the Markoviches that Putin, frustrated with the slow progress of the invasion, we all know, he was bringing in fierce warriors from Chechnya. These, he warned, were Muslim extremists who hated Jews, and they would likely target the famous Rabbi Markovich. The man told them very ominously, "You want to protect your people, but by staying here, you're drawing a target on their backs." Frightening. So the Markoviches realized that they had to leave in order to protect their community. They thought they would stay to protect their community, but after that warning, they saw they had to leave to protect their community. So by this time, the government had prohibited all Ukrainian men between the ages of 18 and 60 from leaving the country, of course. So as Israeli citizens, Rabbi Markovich and his sons, they could evacuate, but most of the men in the Jewish community were trapped. And their mothers, wives, and sisters did not want to abandon them. When the Markoviches realized that they had to leave, they wanted to take with them as many members of the community as they could evacuate. But this was a major problem. If the men couldn't leave, so many of the mothers, sisters, wives said, "I'm not leaving either." And also, they were very afraid to leave. They were afraid to leave everything behind. They thought things would get looted, and of course they would. They would lose everything. And many of them were just afraid. They didn't want to leave behind their pets. That was a very big concern. Most Ukrainians had pets. You couldn't take them with them. And they didn't want to leave them behind. They were afraid of the dangers of the road. Of course, bombs were still falling. So in the end, only 13 people joined Rabbi Yonatan and Ina. Their 22-year-old son, plus a young couple with their 2 daughters, would ride in the Markoviches' 7-seater. The second car in the convoy would be the Markoviches' oldest son, his French wife, and their 3 daughters, and they would ride in another car. They didn't own a car, but a man in the community gave them his car. And the third car would carry a just married couple with Israeli citizenship. The husband of this couple's mother was willing to go because when she was out buying food, her apartment building was bombed. So she had no place to stay anyway. So she joined convoy. And there was a 21-year-old student in that third car. The convoy would be led by this man from the special forces. As soon as Shabbos was over, he told them they had 10 minutes to leave. And he told them that they would be driving at top speed and they couldn't be weighed down by suitcases. So they couldn't take any suitcases with them. Ina ran back to their apartment, grabbed their documents, and they were off. She left all their possessions, including their Shabbos candlesticks. It was already dark, and there was a curfew in effect. So they wonder why, this man's telling us we got to go, but there's a curfew. How can we leave? And he said, "Don't worry." They started calling him the angel. He said, "Don't worry, I will get you through." And as to which border they should go to, they were getting text messages from people who had already left, and they were at the Polish border, which was the nearest border to Kyiv, and they were hearing messages that there's a 3-day wait, a 70-hour wait at the Polish border. So which border should they go to? So the angel said to them, I'm going to monitor the situation as we travel. Don't worry, just follow me. That's what they did. Without knowing where they were going, they just followed him. The highway out of Kyiv was jammed, of course, with a solid line of barely moving cars. I'm sure you've all read about the congested roads, everyone trying to leave us. So far, at this point, 1.25 million refugees have left Ukraine. So the road was jammed with cars. The angel just sailed their convoy along the road in the lane going in the opposite direction. And I think we're going to have we'll have a little embedded video here to see what that was like. Because how could he do that? I mean, how was he not stopped by somebody, the police or the other cars just watched him sail through? But the angel had this way of just like getting through. Now, every few kilometers, they were stopped at checkpoints that were manned by Ukrainian soldiers and also volunteers. The volunteers didn't have guns, but they had axes, knives, and sticks. The angel had told them to open it every time they were stopped at a checkpoint, to open their car windows, even though it was freezing cold outside, so that the people manning the checkpoints could clearly see, their documentation and who was there. And and eventually he got them through each checkpoint. Ina said that at every stop, our hearts stopped. She said the soldiers and volunteers were very nervous. And we were afraid that someone would accidentally shoot us. And that's exactly what happened. I don't know if you read about it, but one Israeli man, a young man trying to escape, trying to get out, was shot and killed by Ukrainians. They were nervous. And, and that's, Ina picked up on that even though they wouldn't deliberately kill them, they might accidentally do so. It was very nerve-wracking. As soon as they left the vicinity of Kyiv, the angel bypassed all the congested highways and he sped up to 160 kilometers an hour. That's 100 miles an hour. And he started driving on dirt roads. And he also started driving through bumpy fields that didn't even have roads. No roads. He's just driving on these bumpy fields. And a lot of the time, this is not in the article, but she told me that he signaled them to turn off their headlights. They didn't want to be a target for anybody. So they're driving through these fields without roads, without headlights. And she was very afraid. She was terrified that the tires would get punctured because just a couple weeks before they had taken a drive out in the country on dirt roads and they had suffered a puncture. And if they got punctured tires there in the dead of night in some remote field, that's the end of their escape. So she was very frightened about that happening. But somehow, for 14 hours, their convoy just barreled through at top speed without getting a single puncture. A lot of miracles here. The angel later told them that every 10 minutes with me, you saved 3 hours. Now, the angel, I asked her, what about bathroom stops? And she said twice we were allowed 10-minute bathroom stops. But of course, they had to refuel. So when the first time they stopped to refuel, they encountered a problem. The Markovich's car ran on diesel. And when the war broke out, it became illegal to sell diesel fuel to any but a military vehicle. Because, of course, there was going to be a shortage. So, again, the angel produced a document, and the gas station attendant duly filled the Markovich's car with diesel fuel and even gave them diesel fuel to take with them. A lot of miracles here. The tires held out until they got to the Romanian border. And then they got 2 flat tires. They waited at the Romanian border for 10 hours. And when it was their turn to pass, they had another problem. The border guard checked their documents, and he said, first of all, the Markovich's car, their insurance had expired. And second of all, their son's car was not registered to him, as I told you. A member of the community had given him the car in order to escape. So this border guard saying, this is not your car. And they called the man back there in Kyiv, and he's on the phone, he's giving them his passport number and everything, this is my car, and I gave it to them, free will. There was no time to register the transfer or anything. The border guard was not hearing any of it. He was not letting them through with the cars. They could get through, but they had to abandon the cars there. Well, how are they going to get anywhere? And he insisted that just leave the cars here, and you can walk, the march 13 kilometers in the rain with the young children to the nearest Romanian bus stop. And Rabbi Markovich prevailed on him. He said, please, we're exhausted, we're hungry and dirty. And the border guard said, you Jews are always dirty. And Rabbi Markovich, remember, he's an ex-IDF officer. He wasn't taking that. He started yelling at him. He said, shame on you. Such anti-Semitism. We're not going to take that. I'm the chief rabbi of Kyiv. He started yelling. And a higher ranking border guard came over to see what was the ruckus, and he apparently recognized Rabbi Markovich was famous in the Ukraine, was on television often. And he apparently recognized Rabbi Markovich, and he got so apologetic. He said, oh, we're so sorry. We're so sorry. Please just go in peace. Goodbye. Go. We do not need to be reported that we're having anti-Semitic incidents here. And so please just go. The sooner you go, the better for us. And they got through with the cars, all 4 vehicles. And Ina later told me, she said, in 22 years in the Ukraine, we experienced anti-Semitism maybe 2 or 3 times. That's all. But here, at that crucial moment, we faced anti-Semitism, and it was the anti-Semitism that saved us. If the border guard had not made that anti-Semitic comment, he had the authority to say the cars can't go through, and that, there was no way to convince him. But as soon as he came out with Jews are dirty, it saved them, and they got through. Okay, once over the border, they were able to repair their 2 flat tires, and the angel checked them into a hotel in the first town they got to in Romania, and the next morning, the angel took his leave. I asked Ina, was he Eliyahu Hanavi? Was he the prophet Elijah? In Jewish lore, we have a figure. The Bible tells us that Eliyahu Hanavi, the prophet Elijah, never died. He ascended to heaven in a fiery chariot. He never died. So he comes down into this world in disguise periodically. So, especially when somebody needs saving. And I asked Ina, was he Eliyahu Hanavi that got you through all that miraculous escape? And Ina just smiled. She said, I don't know. We can only suspect. So the Markoviches were now safely in Romania, but their community was still in lethal danger. The Russian invasion was intensifying. So the rabbi spent the next 3 days tirelessly organizing buses to evacuate more Jews from Kyiv. By this point, people got the point that this wasn't just a passing thing, and if they wanted to save their lives, they had to get out. So as of when I wrote this article, which was yesterday, Rabbi Markovich had gotten 5 buses, each one carrying 50 passengers out of the Ukraine safely to the border. And he's still working on it. So on Thursday, this past Thursday, March 3rd, remember, they left right after Shabbos, Saturday night, 14-hour journey, 10 hours at the Romanian border. And finally on Thursday, They crossed into Hungary, and they were able to get on an El Al flight for Israel. They were greeted at the Israeli airport, the Ben Gurion airport, by 200 people waving Israeli flags. And of course, there were numerous TV crews thrusting microphones at their mouths. And I asked Ina how she felt when she reached Israel. And she said, "I'm happy I'm a Jew. I want to praise and thank all the thousands of people who called us in Kyiv to ask how they can help. This is the greatness of the Jewish heart. This is the real Jewish essence." She heard from Jews, she said, all stripes of Jews. They're Chabad, and they're Orthodox, but they heard from all kinds of Jews. One person, she told me, a Reformed Jew wrote to her, and she said, "I'm Reformed, but I want to help you. How can I help you?" And Nina wrote back to her and said, "What difference does it make that you're Reformed? We're all Jews." Like the unity, the Jewish people when we're in crisis. Since reaching Israel, Rabbi and Rebbe Markovich, they haven't stopped their unflagging efforts to help the Jews of Kyiv. Ina said, "We left in body, but we're still there." And even as you're listening to this broadcast, Rabbi Markovich is on his way back to the Ukrainian border to conduct further rescue missions. He felt that by being right there on the scene at the border, he'd be able to be more effective in his rescue efforts. So he's on his way back. It's not a story with a happy ending. They got out safely. But the tree that the Markoviches planted 22 years ago has been chopped down by the Russian army. And its fruits are scattered. He wanted to unify, have a united, integrated community in Kyiv. And that community has now been torn asunder like an exploding Russian bomb. But there are still individual Jews whose lives must be saved. Rabbi Markovich said in Hebrew, when he landed in Israel at the airport, he quoted the Lubavitcher Rebbe, "Always be happy, but never be satisfied." So I think we can put the link here for also how to help the Markoviches, continue to help, to donate to them, to help get more Jews out of Kyiv. The link will be below. This story appears on aish.com called Harrowing Escape from the Ukraine. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel. The subscription is right here somewhere below. I didn't intend to use the channel to share with you my stories and articles that I write, but someone told me you absolutely should, so I absolutely did. I hope that you've seen the hand of God in their escape and will help them continue to help more Jews.